Welcome to Beyond the Boardroom, the podcast for leaders, changemakers, and purpose-driven souls who believe business can be both powerful and human. I'm your host, Demiri, founder of JD Consulting, culture shaper, connection creator, and champion for authentic, connected leadership. Here we go deeper than metrics and meetings. We explore the real stories, raw moments, and bold ideas that shape how we lead and who we become in the process. From workplace culture to conscious strategy, from self-leadership to systems that truly serve, this is where heart meets business. So grab a coffee, take a breath, and join me as we go beyond the boardroom. Welcome back to Beyond the Boardroom, leading with purpose and connection. Today's conversation is one that I know will resonate deeply with many leaders because we're talking about something that isn't discussed nearly enough. What happens when life doesn't pause for leadership? How do you continue leading when you're carrying grief? And how do you support others when you're depleted yourself? And how do you find direction when the very foundations beneath you have shifted? My guest today is Nicky Hamilton. Nicky is a certified speaker, author, physiotherapist, NLP master coach, Demiri facilitator, Sunshine Coast Business Awards finalist, and the founder of Rise Up Retreats. Over the past 2 decades, she has combined her experience as a health practitioner with more than 15 years of business leadership and a deeply personal journey navigating grief and loss. She has built and led a thriving physiotherapy business, employing a team of 15 women, delivered leadership and resilience programs for over a decade, and trained extensively in Brené Brown's Dare to Lead methodology. But what makes Nicky's perspective so valuable is that her leadership lessons weren't learned in a classroom. They were forged during some of life's most difficult moments. Today, we're exploring how leaders can conquer depletion, manage stress and emotional overwhelm, have courageous conversations, set healthy boundaries, and continue moving forward when life delivers setbacks they never asked for. Because leadership isn't tested when everything is going well. It's tested when life hurts and people still need you. Nicky, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for that introduction. And it's so great to be here. I'm really happy to contribute and to be invited to be a part of this podcast with you. Thank you.
I'm really grateful that you're here and also that you are willing to share a little bit about the grief and the loss in your life. But before we start with that, when people look at leaders from the outside, they often see strength, confidence, and capability. What they don't always see is what leaders might be carrying privately. What has your own journey taught you about hidden weight many leaders are carrying?
The hidden weight, it's taught me a number of things. Hidden weight has taught me that I need to step into authenticity because very often when we have hidden weight, we feel like we're operating with a mask on. And so to be able to step into authenticity and to acknowledge, actually, this is a really challenging time for me. The other pieces that I've learnt through all of this is to ensure that we're not operating from a place of depletion. Because when we are depleted, everything becomes so much harder. So learning to step in and acknowledging how we feel, acknowledging where we're at, and then making sure that we aren't operating from depletion is one of the key things that I've learned through all of this.
Yeah, great. So you have navigated significant grief while simultaneously building and leading a successful business. So looking back, what was the hardest part of leading through this personal loss?
The hardest part for me, in all honesty, and I think many female leaders will resonate with this, is that I thought if you have a bad day, just take a vitamin B and go for a run and get on with it. Like push harder, get it done. And I really believed that leadership was about strategy, about mindset and KPIs. And what I realized in my journey, one of the hardest things I realized is actually not that not that easy. Not that easy. When we navigate significant grief, whether it's, grief comes in many faces and forms for us. It can be a health problem, it can be a family breakdown, relationship breakdown. When we navigate these things, suddenly we realize how challenging it can be to really regulate your emotions, to really show up, really manage our mindset and our stress so we're not coming from a place of reactivity with our team. So the hardest thing for me was acknowledging that I didn't know it all, acknowledging that I needed to step out of the mindset of operating from my head and learn to operate also from my heart and to listen to that, to be softer with myself. And once I learnt those skills, I actually became a better leader.
Yeah, great. So before we now dive any further into the podcast, I would like for you to share a little bit about your personal journey, about the loss and grief that you had to battle. Of course, take as much time as you need with that, but I think for the listeners to then really make sense of the connection of what you have learned, it would be great for them to know what has actually happened in your life.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. And this story, for women out there listening, it's a challenging story to listen to because all of us can feel that sense of sadness that occurs. But, my life prior to all of this was about achievement, success, and I thought nothing could go wrong in my life. I was one of these women that really believed nothing could go wrong until it did. And it was back in February 2014 that my life took a catastrophic turn in that our son Baxter passed away. And I found myself transformed from that confident, ambitious woman to literally an empty shell of my former self. I struggled with grief, with sadness, with brain fog, with not only losing him, but feeling like I'd lost who I was, my identity. What sort of mother was I not to prevent this? It really felt like I was, sitting at the bottom of the ocean looking up to the surface and wondering if I'd breathe again. And I'd never experienced anything like this before in my life. And I really didn't know how I was going to get through. And yes, I sought all of the help that I could to try and find my way through that. I saw counselors, I saw psychologists, I told my story. And eventually, after many months, I found myself in a space where I was tired of telling the story, but still felt fatigued, still felt depleted, still didn't know what my next step was, didn't know how to find my way out. And it felt like grief was so deep that I couldn't navigate my way through. And it was probably 6 months later that I had a girlfriend approach me and say, look, Nicky, I don't know how to help you. I want to help you. I know you're really struggling with this. And I was thinking, I don't know how to help me either. Like, I'm trying everything, but it feels like I'm not getting anywhere. And she said, look, I'd love to invite you on my retreat I'm about to run in Bali, a yoga retreat. And I'd love to gift it to you. You just have to pay for your flights. And do you know, I've never been offered anything so generous before in my life, but my initial response to that was, oh no, I don't want to do that. I'm too apprehensive. What if I haven't got it all together? What if I cry? What if I can't meet other women? What if I want to come home? I barely left the house. Can I make it to the airport? Like, all of these questions and apprehensions. And what I realized underneath that resistance was I'd never given myself permission to receive before. It felt foreign. And with all of the self-doubt and self-blame that happens through grief, now I know for women who are listening, you may or may not have navigated grief in any form. So like I said, it could be divorce, it could be a family breakdown, where you find yourself suddenly looking at the rubble and wondering, how am I supposed to navigate this? And what happens in that circumstance very commonly, and this is what happened to me, was an inner dialogue of self-blame. Like, if I just change one thing, maybe if I'd just turned left instead of right, maybe if I'd asked a different doctor, if I'd, all of the self-blame made me feel like I'm not sure I deserve anything so beautiful as to receive a retreat. And it was right at that point in time that I came across a quote by Dr. Demiri. Now, I've subsequently trained under him. He's changed my life. But that quote by Dr. Demiri read, "Whatever you have or have not done, you're worthy of love." And as I was considering that retreat and considering this resistance to receive, and considering whether I felt like I was worthy or not, I knew I had to make a change. I had to change something. My health was suffering, my business was suffering, I knew my relationship would suffer next. And if I didn't step in and start saying yes to myself. So that was really my first step. And going on that retreat, was I apprehensive? Yeah, I was. Super apprehensive. But I flew to Bali and I went on that retreat, and it was the best first step I'd ever made, because as a woman leading through loss, we need to, and this is some of the framework that I teach, is to recognize when we're in the ditch and recognize the only way out is up to us. And so the first step for me was recognizing, look, whatever I've done or haven't done, however I've landed here, I'm still worthy of love and connection and joy and fulfillment in my life. And I have permission to receive. From a woman who has spent my life giving and pushing, I'm actually allowed to receive. And so that was my first lesson. And on that retreat, I really considered, what do I actually need for my life moving forward? I needed to figure out how to calm emotions, because I had no idea how to do that. I needed to figure out how to manage stress and reactivity, because that's where I felt that's the space I was living in. And I needed to find direction again, within myself, but also with my business. So that then set me down a pathway of learning. So I came home to Australia and just took a deep dive into learning all the neuroscience behind a stressed brain, around emotional regulation, Demiri facilitation, and it helped me start to navigate my way through this. So that's how I landed as a woman who was successful, ambitious, confident, landed at the bottom of the ocean and lay there for quite some time until I realized that it was up to me to push up from the ground. Yeah. To push up to the top, and then to start finding my way through, but finding other ways.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing so openly and vulnerably. I do appreciate that, and for allowing us to see and hear you in that. And I think losing a child, I mean, losing anyone in your life is always hard, but especially a child, it's a part of your future. So thank you for that. Thank you. So we often talk about burnout and leadership, but as you were saying, grief creates just a complete different type of depletion. How would you describe the difference?
Thank you so much. That's a great question, because I've experienced burnout as well. I think all of us who are listening probably are in the space of like, actually, I've reached a hurdle. Actually, I needed to make a change. So the first change that I navigated was, of course, navigating deep grief, and understanding that I needed to start filling my tank again. So if you can imagine, hopping in your car, you're about to drive to work, you put the key in the engine, you start the car, and you can't move because you've got no fuel in the tank. That's where I was in grief. And we think of fuel in the tank as physical, like I'm sleeping well, I'm eating well, I've got good nutrition, I exercise, but it's not just physical fuel. It's mental fuel. Like, am I managing stress? Am I calming overwhelm? Am I able to close down tabs in the brain? These are all the things that need to happen for our mental fuel tank. And our emotional fuel tank is, am I calming my emotions? Am I connecting to joy? Am I socializing with others? And very often we reach a point of depletion in those fuel tanks and think, well, I'm just tired. Maybe I'll just have an early night, and I'm waking up and I'm still tired. What is that? And so ultimately with grief, it's a completely empty emotional fuel tank. And very often with burnout, it's a mental fuel tank that's depleted. Now, it can be a combination of all three. It can be a combination of all three. And I've had that experience. If you're happy for me to share a story, I've had that experience where in actual fact, it was nearly going blind that actually made me realize I needed to make a change in my leadership style. So this is 10 years down the track after my experience and our lives forever changed from Baxter. I had built up my physiotherapy business. I was running the team. I was built another business. I was running retreats. My dad was unwell, so I was flying up and down from Sydney. My fuel tank was okay. I was learning to manage my fuel tank. It's just that I hadn't been clear enough in my direction and was choosing to turn right for my business, to turn left for the retreat, to fly up and down from Sydney. And I was very, very stretched thin, almost like an overloaded plate. I don't know if anyone's ever felt that their plate is just got too much on it. Now, we can work on our plate capacity, make the plate bigger, which is helpful, like putting fuel in the tank. But there still comes a time where we have to learn to say no and make sure our plate is managed. And I wasn't managing it very well. So I reached a point where I was trying to run a retreat and my eye got really red and swollen. And I thought to myself, look, I don't actually have time for this. I've got a business awards night to go to. I've got to run the retreat. I've got a problem with a staff member. There's a business spot fire, all of these things. So even though I'd worked at building my capacity, I hadn't yet managed what was on my plate very well. And lo and behold, I went to an ophthalmologist as my eye got even worse, and he looked at me and he said, Nicky, how long has it been like this? And I said, about 6 days. Why did you leave it so long? I was like, I didn't have time. It's like, you're about 24 hours off going blind. And then I realized that ultimately all of us reach a point where we realize I need to make a change. It's either my health is suffering or my relationship is reaching a crumbling point or there is cracks appearing in the system. And part of that change is not just putting fuel in the tank, but actually getting very clear about what you put on your plate and your direction. So I think burnout very often is not an emotion. Sometimes it is an emotional depletion. Sometimes it's a mental depletion, but sometimes it's not being clear enough with our direction, clear enough with what belongs on our plate and what doesn't. And these are the things that can lead to burnout because it's overloading our capacity.
Yeah. I think that's where I want to cross into your book. So you've just written a book, Selfish Leadership, How to Lead Without Losing Yourself. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yes.
So, and I love the title, Selfish Leadership, because at the end of the day, we do need to look at ourselves first before we can lead anyone else. That's what I'm a big believer of. That's what I do in my business. I help people be more self-aware and lead themselves. Tell me a little bit about the book, but then also how does that combine all your learnings about depletion, about burnout, about the grief, the loss, where does it all come together?
Yes, thank you. Great question. And I hesitated on the name Selfish Leadership for so long. I was like, it sounds really greaty. I don't know if anyone's going to like it. But in the end, that's what it is. It's learning to give yourself permission to choose yourself so you can give more. It's not to step on others necessarily, but it's to include yourself. And everything in the book has been like an authentic learning experience where I've landed face down in the dirt quite a few times and figured out, look, I can learn all of the things. Like I've done all of the study. I've studied Demiri, I've studied with Brené Brown. I've learned all of the things and I've ticked all the boxes. But until you actually implement and bring it into your heart rather than just living it in your head and ticking it as a box, until you implement, then eventually you can reach a point where you fall down. And so the book really accumulates lots of stories through my own journey as a leader and running a business, all of the things that can happen, but it really outlines my Rise Up framework. So the framework, RISE, R means recognize when you're heading toward a ditch and know that, you can circle in blame, you can circle in, the he says, the she says, what should be happening, how life should be, but ultimately it's up to you to be accountable for your life and to be able to start making changes for yourself. So that's what the R was, and I is to be able to start putting inner fuel in. And like I said, our inner fuel tanks are not just body health. Like, I'm a physio, so I love talking about body health, but it is actually our mental health, our fuel tank, and also our emotional fuel tank. So these three fuel tanks are designed to be able to, like I said, make sure that we can drive. And without that, then we're stalled. And so I go through really clear, practical ways. Because I'm a physio, I'm quite the practical sort of person. I love information, but unless it's applied practically, we can lose it. So it includes practical stories of how to implement conquering depletion. And then S stands for, set your compass, set your GPS, know what it is that you value, what's important to you, know what your strengths are, know what your team strengths are. And so I share stories around being able to really find direction, because, who agrees that you can have fuel in your tank, but if you pull out of your driveway and head north, and then someone calls you south and you think, well, I'll go there, and hang on, you go into self-doubt, maybe I'll head east, and then you think, hang on a minute, what was I doing? I better drive west. And you end up back in your driveway thinking, I don't know what's happened to the day. I've been pulled in 5 different directions, and that's a lack of clarity in your direction. So I go through ways of getting really clear with that. And E stands for empower your team and empower yourself, which means ultimately, I call it the backseat drivers of life. Like, you can have fuel in the tank, you can have clear direction, and suddenly you've got a backseat driver that starts yapping in the background saying, hey, you should be doing it this way. What about that? And then suddenly you've got a backseat riot going on. And what you really need to realize is how to have courageous conversations, how to be clear in your communication, how to engage, trust, and inspire a team. So that way you can have a team that thrives, and not backseat drivers that are, having a mini riot in the in the back as you're trying to drive. So that's the framework that I run through in the book. It's designed to be a bit like a workbook as well. So it's got questions and reflections through it. So that way, and I've got a workbook that goes with it. That way, women can work their way through almost their own coaching program to be able to lead through moments. I call it like moments of messiness. Like, grief is messy. Yes. And as leaders, we like to have things all together. And so these are the things that these are the strategies that we need to be able to make sure that we can lead with whole hearts, even through messy moments.
Yeah, great. I think that's there's some really good tips and tricks in there. I want to go back to the depletion and the fuel tank.
Yes.
So really, I'm just wondering, how do you define depletion? How can leaders recognize when they are heading towards it? And the only reason I'm asking this is sometimes people can feel they're just tired. It's just general tiredness. And how would you maybe differentiate between depletion and burnout? But then on top of that, because you're mainly focusing on women, there is this particular area called, or particular time in our lives called perimenopause. So because that puts another whole spanner in the works for some women with feeling tired as well. So where does depletion start and finish? How does that all possibly connect or not connect?
Yeah, I love that. And even though I describe our fuel tanks as 3 separate places, body, mind, and heart, ultimately there is overlap there. So when we go through perimenopause and our hormones are all over the place, it can affect our body in a way that our sleep is impacted. And now my mind health is impacted because I'm tired and I'm more reactive. And now so it can have a flow-on effect. I think to really know what type of depletion you're navigating in which fuel tank is you'll notice different sensations or different feelings with them. So when you're mentally depleted, you'll feel like, I can't make another decision. Don't ask me to make another decision. And that sense of overwhelm, sense of too many tabs open in the brain, that is a real sense of, and maybe having a higher stress response. So realizing you're getting stressed about small things more easily than you probably should. and recognizing that, hang on a minute, I'm reacting to this, and I feel like I'm not managing my nervous system, and I'm constantly in that stress zone. So these are the symptoms that go with the mental fuel tank running low. When our emotional fuel tank runs low, we will tend to feel a bit like maybe we're wearing a mask at work. Like I've got something that I'm hiding. Maybe there's some, like, not hiding, but I'm having to be someone else, but I'm actually experiencing emotions in the background, like sadness, like grief, like the Heart Math Institute will describe our emotions as depleting or renewing. So our depleting emotions are, that feeling of sadness, the anxiousness, the worry, the resentment, the anger. These emotions will deplete our fuel tank. It's not to say we shouldn't experience those emotions. We should, because it's totally normal. But when we are experiencing them and then feeling like we have to hide, that's when our fuel tank emotionally is running low. And another symptom of that would be a bit more isolation. Like maybe I'm not going out socially. Maybe I'm not connecting to other people. Maybe I can't remember the last time I had fun. Maybe I can't remember the last time I did something just for me because I enjoy it, like a belly dancing class or a painting class or something that I really love. And so these are all indicators of the fuel tank running low. And when it reaches a tipping point of burnout, I mean, ultimately it's recognizing that, a bit like your car fuel tank, you'll have little indicators along the way. Like, hang on a minute, we're a quarter of a tank down. Hang on a minute, we're half full. Hang on a minute. And so you'll have indicators, and part of our job as leaders is to recognize your own internal indicators and start paying attention. It's because when we ignore them, that's when we reach a point of kind of like, okay, now I'm on the side of the road in a ditch.
Yeah, very good. And I guess what are some of the early warning signs that leaders or women often miss?
So the warning signs of depletion or direction, or the early warning signs. Well, fatigue is a big early warning sign. That's always a big early. And there are, like I said, there are many types of fatigue. There's a great book on the 7 types of fatigue. I just talk about 3: body, mind, and heart. So physical fatigue will feel like my joints are aching. I want to go to bed earlier. That sort of physical sensation, we can all recognize that. But our mental fatigue is the early warning signs. Is that, like I said, like I feel like I've made enough decisions today. I feel tired of deciding. I feel tired of that overwhelmed feeling. And our early warning sign of an emotional fuel tank is looping into depleting emotions more easily and having a hard time shifting it. When we have good emotional capacity, an emotional fuel tank that's full, and if I give it another description, like a full plate, like a big plate that can hold things, it means that we can still feel sad or still feel resentful or frustrated at life, at the things that happen around us. But we have room on our plate as well for joy and for hope and for calm. So I can feel that sense of a depleting emotion, but I've got enough room to be able to hold that as well as experience and acknowledge calm at the same time. When our emotional fuel tank is low, or our plate gets smaller, suddenly we're trying to fit everything on a tiny saucer, and then I experience something that makes me feel resentful or frustrated or annoyed or sad. When we experience a depleting emotion, suddenly it takes up the whole plate, and I can't find room for other emotions. So that they're little early indicators that we're starting to run low on our fuel tank.
Yeah. Now I'm curious about your opinion on this, but so many high performers wear exhaustion as a badge of honor and constantly being busy. And I don't even use the word busy, but I'm doing it now for the purpose of this podcast. But why do you think we've normalized the depletion, the exhaustion, everything that comes with it?
Yes, that is such a great question. I love that question because I was that woman. I was definitely that woman. I was like, I'm too busy to go to an ophthalmologist. I'm going blind but I'm too busy and exhausted running retreats, running the business, managing the team, that I'll just wait till I nearly go blind and then pause to think, hang on a minute, what am I doing here? And so sometimes it takes a tipping point for us to really recognize, what are we doing? Now, if it's okay by you and the listeners, I'll venture into a little bit of, I don't know if anybody knows Tony Robbins, but love or hate him, like he's got a lot of great ideas. He's very masculine in his energy, of course, so I don't agree with everything that he puts out there, but he's got some amazing ideas, and he does share that we have 4 human needs. And our 4 human needs are to feel important or significant, to feel connection, to have certainty or stability, or, the same, and also to have variety. Now, these are all opposite, of course. To have variety is to go on a holiday. To have certainty is to live the same day and we all need all 4 things. Now, here's what happens for women, and this is a bit of a blanket approach. Of course, every woman's going to be different, but that strategy of working to exhaustion is normally feeding one of those 4 needs. I feel important is probably one of them. I feel certain about what I'm doing. I'm filling my diary to the absolute brim, and I know what I'm doing at 1:05. So very often, when we are running a strategy that's not resourceful for us, as in I'm loading myself to the point of depletion, usually it's because I'm trying to get one of my needs met, but I'm just not doing it in a very resourceful way. So we can meet our needs for significance by hosting a podcast. That's a resourceful way. Yeah. We can meet our need for significance by working ourselves into a pit of exhaustion. I feel important, but it's now costing me. So the question is, what need is this meeting? Can I do it in a more resourceful way? And is the way I'm doing it, what's it costing me? Because what I realized in my journey is that it was costing me my health. But it might be costing you your relationship. It might be costing you your team. Because who agrees exhausted leaders aren't necessarily the best leaders at making decisions or building team connection. It might be costing you your business, in actual fact. So part of it is recognizing, okay, this is a strategy I'm choosing. Usually it's to meet one of those 4 needs. Now, there's other reasons, of course. That's not going to be the only reason, but the deeper question is, what is it actually costing us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I 100% agree with that. So when a leader feels overwhelmed or anxious or emotionally flooded, what's actually the first thing they should be doing?
Yes, that is a great question. There's a couple of strategies. The first strategy I love, which is very, very simple, is simply to acknowledge how you feel without the story. Because here's the problem. If I feel anxious, or if I feel, just say I feel frustrated and I start telling a story, well, I feel frustrated because this team member did this and then they said that and they shouldn't have done this and now this has happened, and now we're mixing a feeling with a story, and it just grows legs in our minds and starts to snowball. So part of it is to remove the story and just to acknowledge the feeling, which is, it's a framework that I teach from one of my coaches, actually, Sarah Ann, which is acknowledge, release, move. So acknowledge how you feel without the story. Actually, I feel frustrated. Allow yourself that. That's okay. Take a breath is another one that helps just calm the reactive center in the nervous system. So pausing, taking a breath, a slow exhale, means we go from the red reactive zone back into a bit more calm. Acknowledge how I feel, take a breath. ARM, this is called, is R stands for release expectations. Release expectations of how things should be. Life shouldn't be this way. They should have done that. I should have done this. And when we release expectations, it's not coming into a place of despondency and I give up. It's coming from a place of, okay, this is how it is now. Got it? It's not going to be like this forever. M means, what's my next move? So that framework essentially means we can acknowledge how we feel, which starts to calm the nervous system. Just take a breath. We release expectations of how things should be, because that is part of the story. they shouldn't have, I should have. It keeps you looping in a story. When we release expectations of how things should be and just acknowledge, okay, this is where we're at. We're in a bit of a mess. Okay, now I can make my next move, not based on reactive stories, but acknowledging where I am and where I need to go and what's the next step I need to take. So that's a framework that I love to share with women. I always share with women, and I shared this morning, I was running a group Zoom this morning, is to practice that technique in small, easy moments first. A bit like when you first learn to ride a bike, you've got your trainer wheels on first. So practice it in small moments, like when you're stuck in traffic. Acknowledge, I feel frustrated and worried I'm going to be late for my meeting. Release expectations of they should have let me in, this red light shouldn't be red, it should be green, there shouldn't be traffic at this time. Release expectations, this is how it is, I'm stuck in traffic, what's my next move? Okay, I'm going to call the next person and say I'm going to be late, I apologise, not much I can do. Put on a great song on your playlist and lift your energy. So that would be an easy way of implementing that strategy in easy moments first, because who agrees that hard moments, like when you're in the middle of a difficult discussion, it's harder to do those emotional regulation techniques. So we practice it in easy moments first to be able to start to build confidence and skill with that.
Yeah, great. So when you were leading your teams and building your business during the challenging times through grief, what would you say you needed the most that you didn't have?
Well, that's a really great question. It was probably different things at different times. I think the biggest thing that I needed, honestly, was understanding. Because when you go through grief, for me, one of my biggest hurdles was feeling like nobody could really see what was going on. Like when we're navigating these challenging experiences as leaders, it felt to me I was carrying around a hole in my heart the size of the universe that no one could see. And what I really needed and wanted at that time was to be understood. And in all honesty, I think the realization that I've had is that no one will ever really understand. And I have to be okay with that. And when we navigate our own unique set of circumstances, our own unique challenges, it can be disheartening to feel like no one understands. At the same time, there are many people out there that I don't understand their journey. And so having empathy means that I don't need everyone's understanding. They're doing their best to understand. And I give that empathy out in that I acknowledge that, well, I don't know somebody else's difficulty or what that pathway is like to walk. At the same time, I send them love and I give myself permission to receive that. So I think what I needed at the time was understanding, and I sought that in so many ways, and I don't think I ever really found it. At the same time, I'm not sure it's actually entirely possible.
Yeah. And I would agree with that it's not entirely possible because no one has had the experiences that you had. No one, like even when other people lose their children for whatever reason, the circumstances are different. The experiences leading up to that have been different. So I don't think anyone will ever 100% understand. They can maybe relate, but understanding is a whole different thing altogether.
Yeah, agreed. And everyone's story is so unique that it's not possible. But I think what we can all recognize is that through any story like that, it's navigating feelings of depletion or overwhelm or sadness. It's learning how to regulate that and make sure that we've got a fuel tank that's at least half full so we can keep moving in whatever way, giving ourselves permission to pause for ourselves. And that I think that one of the harder things that I navigated as well is that I growing up, and even as myself as an early sort of successful woman in business and leadership and very academic, I was actually very critical of myself. Like I should be better. I should be better than this. And what I recognized is part of what I needed was some kindness toward myself. And I actually got annoyed when someone said, be kind to yourself. I felt like saying, oh, look, please don't tell me this. I just need to figure this out. But ultimately, in the end, it was learning to be kind to myself and to give myself permission to let myself pause and breathe from time to time. And in actual fact, that learning that skill meant that I could connect with team members in a different way. Learning that skill made me a more resilient leader and meant that my business actually grew with a team that trusted me rather than being someone who just pushed through and criticized herself along the way.
Yeah. Well, based on what you were just saying, I have two questions for you. So the first one is, what is something that grief sort of taught you that you wish leaders would understand, or that leaders understood, as well as, do you believe that leaders need to be fully healed before they can lead others?
They're two great questions. Thank you. What grief has taught me? Grief, and if you're listening, you may or may not agree with this. It depends where you're at. But for me, grief opened my heart. It's a portal to the heart if you let it. And the problem is grief makes you shut down initially because you feel like the pain's too much and you can't share, or you can't be yourself. You have to hide the healing moments. And for a little while that might be true. And I don't think that's a bad thing, to wrap yourself up in a cocoon for a while. But ultimately, if you let love in and give yourself permission to receive, to be kind, to be connected to your heart, which is whatever that is for you, whether it's a connection to something greater than yourself, that can also be true. I think for me, I wish for leaders to learn not just, and like part of what I teach is learning these two train tracks. Like part of us is learning how to have a clear mind, to be able to make decisions, to use strategy. But at the same time, we also need an open heart, because with that open heart, we can connect, we can build teams, we can have, build connection with customers. And these two train tracks are needed. And grief for me really opened up that heartfelt quality of, I need to be more empathetic with myself and others, and also to be able to listen to those feelings, to listen to my intuition a little bit more, and to allow that. And so I really wish leaders would learn that, because when we have a hard exterior shell, it's just armor. As Brené Brown would put it, it's armor. And so grief taught me to drop all my armor. Like I couldn't carry it anymore. I could barely carry myself. So there's no point in the armor. So that's one thing. The second question, oh my goodness, I've forgotten the second question.
No, that's fine.
Don't ask me two things at once.
I'm just glad that I wrote it all down just before I was asking it. The second question was, do you believe leaders need to fully be healed before they can lead others?
No, I actually don't believe that, because I think we're always in a process of healing. Like, don't you think it's a constantly evolving space? But I think what they do need is and I'm looking for a word, it's self-reflection and the ability to step up and learn and own when I've got that wrong. Like, it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to not know. It's okay to not have all the answers, because I think if you're in a space of having to heal and you're not quite healed, but you think that you know everything and you've got all the answers and nobody can tell you, then we're reaching a roadblock. That's not a successful leader. But a successful leader, I think, can work through her own healing journey in whatever that looks like, and step into acknowledging, look, I don't have all the answers and I'm working on it, and to be able to be self-reflective. So I got into habits like, at the end of my day, what went well? What did I learn? How can I shift this? What do I need? I feel this, what do I need? So learning to attend to my own needs. And all of these happened in that I was leading and I wasn't fully healed. I was leading, but had enough insight to self-reflect as I went, and to acknowledge when I messed up, when I got it wrong. Actually, I probably overreacted to that. I apologize. We need to be able to unfold this and move forward in this way. So I learnt those skills through trial and error. So, yeah, I think the answer is no. I think we're always in a process of healing throughout our lives. And if we were to say that we have to be perfect and we have to be fully healed and only then can we lead, I think that really limits us. We only need to be willing to self-reflect.
Yeah, I love that, and I 100% agree with you. I also agree with you on the fact that grief can open up your heart. From my experience with grief, it has opened up my heart as well, and made me go through a whole healing journey altogether. And it's actually really interesting how, like, you are pretty much at a crossroads when it comes to the grief, right? So you can take the left and open up your heart and allow everything to happen, and yeah, allow to soften yourself, allowing yourself to receive, allowing yourself to really go through the process and heal over time. And then there is the other direction that you can take, where you just build up those walls and you build the resentment, and you just keep running around with this armor, as you call it, and possibly even over the years add more weight to it. And wouldn't it be nice if some people that have chosen that path could just take off that backpack, just put it down, and actually move on to that heart opening area? And yeah, it's really interesting how some people just choose up until the end to just carry that backpack with them.
Yes. And I think the problem is, as leaders, it's hard to feel vulnerable. Do you know, like,
Yeah.
if we admit we don't know it all, if we admit we're having a hard time, if we admit it steps us into the realm of, and I know Brené Brown talks about this a lot, but the realm of vulnerability, and it's very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. And I can understand it's more comfortable to have the armor on and just go, well, I'll soldier on, don't talk to me, I'm behind a closed door, and I'll send you an email. It's much easier to do that, but at what cost? In the end, at what cost? And so it is really ultimately making a decision. And each decision I've made, each crossroads that I've reached, like the crossroads where I was deciding whether to go on this retreat I was about to receive or not, like each crossroads represents a level of apprehension, because it's uncertain. Okay, what is this? It's dark on the other side of that. I don't know what's going to happen. But ultimately, the only thing we can do is, and I know this is going to sound really cliche, but lean into love, and to be able to feed and open ourselves to stepping into receiving, stepping into, like I said in my selfish leadership book, stepping into really choosing myself with depletion, stepping into really choosing what direction I want to take myself without apology, without resentment. This is who I choose to be. This is how I choose to be fulfilled. And learning those steps, I believe, makes us more human and also helps us live more fulfilling lives.
Yeah, I agree. I have two more questions for you.
Yeah. Love it.
So first of all, has loss changed your definition of success? And if so, what was your definition of success in the past versus what it is now? That's the very first question. And then later on, I'll ask you the second one.
Yeah, I'll ask you the second one, because otherwise I'll forget. Yes, I think I used to believe that success was linked to, like winning a business award, winning titles. I used to chase so many titles. I used to chase so many, qualifications. I used to believe that was a level of success. And it's not that it's not success, but for me, it was the recognition that success for me was about my own personal fulfillment. And my own personal fulfillment was getting very, very clear on what's important to me, what I value, and how can I reach that without, like I said, that level of exhaustion and just arriving at the end of the day thinking I can't take another step, I'm so tired. So success for me now is very different. I know I've got a lot of qualifications and I've done that. but I often don't even share it because I don't recognize it as such an important thing anymore. What's important for me is to be able to step into fulfillment and what it is that lights me up personally. So that for me is now my success. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, success for me probably was initially on what it appears on the outside to people. And now, having navigated grief, it's more about what do I feel on the inside is telling me and giving me that sense of fulfillment. Whether the outside approves or not is kind of irrelevant now. I'm not worried about that anymore.
I love that. And while you were talking about the awards, so I was actually just at an award ceremony because I was a finalist for an award, and someone was saying to me, "Oh, well, what do you need the award for?" and things like that. I'm like, "Look, I don't know who nominated me, so the nomination was already a surprise, and then becoming finalist was a surprise as well." So I did go to the awards. I didn't win them, which is fine. And for me, it was just actually the satisfaction, even though after I didn't win them, I was just like, I've achieved so much in my life in many different ways, including that personal inner
Yes,
contentment, all those sort of things, which is more important than any award ever could be. However, the experience of attending the award actually just added to my version of success in terms of learning something new, growing internally
absolutely.
as well. So
I
yeah,
love that. And
yeah,
ultimately, I just on that, I don't believe like what I've shared. It's not to
yeah,
dismiss the accomplishments because ultimately, at that point in my life, it did give me fulfillment. I'm just no
yeah,
longer chasing that. And
yeah,
in actual fact, awards, it's an honor. In actual fact, a recognition that we need to allow ourselves to land and but at the same time at the same time is to recognize it's not the only way that I need to feel fulfilled. And I know just I had my book launch just 3 days ago and I managed to get Amazon bestseller in 3 categories, which I was super excited about. I got down and the next morning and saw the awards, and then I celebrated, and then I went to the gym and I vacuumed the house and I made my lunch. Like life continues.
correct,
And
yes,
it's not going to define me or be the only thing that I need to do
yeah,
for fulfillment. I still need to
yeah,
attend to my daily life. But I noticed, as I was vacuuming, I'm like, I'm Amazon bestseller and I'm still vacuuming the house. Like it's just another day, like
yeah,
in a way. So part
yeah,
of it is recognizing and being really clear within yourself. What brings you
yeah,
fulfillment? Yeah.
yeah. And I can also relate to that from that perspective because I'm part of an anthology and that also won a couple of awards. And I was like, yeah, cool. Life still keeps going the way it is.
It does. It does. As long as
Yeah,
you're happy within yourself with that, then that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Well, my last question, and after that question, if there's anything else that you want to add to the podcast that I haven't asked you or that you really want to share, please do so. But my last question is if a leader listening today wanted to lead with more purpose and connection starting tomorrow, what is the one behavior they would need to change first and why?
Mm. Well, this is a good question. What's the one behavior? For me, it's this is a challenging question because there's probably not just one thing, but a couple of things. So the first thing is really to know very clearly what brings you fulfillment. Now, here's what happens to many women, especially women like myself. So I'm only speaking from personal experience. Is that when we are people that give, very often we put other people's needs first and find ourselves with our own needs or wants sort of buried under the rubble for a while, and we can find ourselves in a place where we actually don't know what's important to us anymore. And so that can happen slowly over time with overgiving. Sometimes it happens quickly, like the rug being pulled out from under you. Like suddenly you're going through a divorce or your kids have left home and you're thinking, I don't even know what's important anymore. Like I've kind of lost myself. So part of it is being able to really reflect. And I run through questions in my book, also on my retreats, on helping women dig through what's important. The second thing ultimately is to care less about what other people think of that. which can be hard. It's not to care less about other people. It's just to care less about everybody else's opinions, because there'll always be someone that will be saying you should be doing X, Y, Z, whatever it is. And that opinion is only based on that person's values. They're speaking from what's important to them. And so once we can let that go and recognize, actually, I have full permission to be me, we can start to step forward into that. So the first step is learning what it is for you. And sometimes it's lost. Sometimes it needs questions. And then learning to let go of the opinions that surround us.
Great. Well, great answer to that question. Thank you. So is there anything else that you want to add that we haven't discussed that you really want to share?
Well, firstly, I want to say thank you, because it's been a great conversation. And just to any of the listeners out there, like, if you are in that space of navigating grief, navigating life's messy moments, looking at the tipped out puzzle, thinking, I'm not sure how to continue or what's my next step? Like, how do I do this? The first thing that I want you to know is that you're not alone, because very often we feel in those circumstances that we are alone. And especially in leadership, we can feel like we're alone because we've got a team sort of depending on us. So just to not be afraid to reach out. I'm sure my socials will be connected with you, but just to acknowledge that you're not alone. And it is actually a very normal process for us to experience grief and loss throughout our lives in whatever face and form that takes. Because when we feel alone, then it's even more isolating. So I think just to acknowledge, you're not alone. We all navigate our different stories, and the first step is to give yourself permission to receive and give yourself permission to put fuel in your own tank, so that you can at least start to carve a pathway forward for yourself. So I hope that's helpful for any of the listeners.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. And yes, of course, I'll pop all your details into the show notes so the listeners can reach out to you. So that is it for today, Nicky. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to us at one point catching up in person.
I would love that. I would so love that. Except it's very cold in Adelaide, I believe. You're in Adelaide. It's freezing. I'm in Queensland. I need some warmth. I'll only meet you in summer over there.
Look, I'm happy to come up to Queensland anytime.
Okay. That's much nicer.
All right. That's right.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone listening.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Beyond the Boardroom. I'm truly grateful to have you here. So if today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love for you to follow the show, leave a review, or share it with someone who'd find it valuable. Your support helps us spread the message of purposeful, connected leadership even further. So until next time, take care, stay curious, and lead with heart.